On American Thanksgiving, Hunter Hodies and I are here to tell you what we're thankful for in the NHL in 2024.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That's my good friend, the co-host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. We want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where you enjoy the NFL season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So it is American Thanksgiving down here in the States, and we are going to have a very nice and light, reflective episode looking back on the last calendar year. We can bleed back into the fall of last season if necessary for this conversation, but just talking about the NHL macro level, individual storylines, nice memories, things that you can take a moment and be thankful for and look back on. Hunter and I, we have some overlap, and obviously Hunter and I, we have similar ideas about hockey, where it's going, what matters, and naturally that's going to lend itself to us valuing the same thing. But I want to start out with the obvious. I mean, I know the NHL, for as much flack as we give them for their marketing, the marketing campaign that they have going on right now with the various young stars that culminates with Sid about kids these days and that we're in a new golden age of the NHL. It's hard not to feel that way when you look at the quality of talent and the state of the game in relation to even as recently as 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. You know, Jamie Benn won an Art Ross with 87 points 10 years ago. You look at now where McDavid's going to push for 130, 140 points. McKinnon is going to push for 140 points. Austin Matthews had almost 70 goals last year. And that's three guys. And we could be here all day just naming, you know, the litany of stars. You could do Marner and Kaprizov and Draisaitl and Roman Josi and Evan Bouchard and Artemi Panarin and Rope Hintz and Jason Robertson. And you still got the old dogs kicking, which I know you and I want to talk about, highlighting some of the guys from back in the day who are still playing at high levels. But it's hard not to feel like we are getting, if we are not already, into a new golden age of the NHL, because there's more talent than ever.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love that. Goes with my first thing I'm thankful for, Nick, and that is I'm thankful that scoring is up. And don't get me wrong, I love good goaltending, but as scoring goes up, obviously the average save percentage in the league is going to go down. You've seen it go down this year. Remember when average goaltending, man, was, 910, 912? Yeah. Now it's, Nick, it's barely even, 900, 903, 904. It's continuing to go down as scoring goes up. And it makes for, definitely a lot more entertaining games as a whole. And I love that we're seeing more scoring. You're right. I mean, just just a few years ago when you brought up Jamie Benn, not even reaching 100 points, winning the Art Ross. Scoring was down during those years, when we were at times in middle school and sometimes in high school. But now, we're both out of college, as everyone keeps also aging a bit. It's just awesome seeing all this talent come in and seeing all this scoring go up. You're seeing a lot more 4-3 games, 5-4, 6-5. Heck, we saw last week that crazy Tampa Bay Columbus game that ended 7-6. That was awesome to watch. So I love that we're seeing a lot more scoring in today's NHL. And I think it's only a matter of time before it keeps going even more up.
I think naturally sports operate in cycles. So I'm sure at some point in the next few years, we will see a hard cycle back, similarly to this year, how in the NFL we're having a rushing boom where, Saquon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, all on pace for 1,500 to 2,000 rushing yards. So I do think we will see some attempt at balancing that out. I think at some point in the next handful of seasons, we will see a team go the full other way and invest more significantly in their defense and their goaltending as a means of trying to slow this down. The one last thing I wanted to touch on in regards to just talking about the quality of talent throughout, something that I was talking about with somebody over this past weekend, because we were talking about Lafreniere, how he signed the long contract as a 24-year-old. And this is obviously anecdotal, but for the most part, it feels like those young guys, they don't suffer the serious injury setbacks anymore. I mean, the draft is never going to be an exact science, but you go back and look at the drafts since 2015, post 2015, those first 5 to 10 picks, I don't want to say we've entirely gotten it down to a science, but we have weeded out a lot of the fat, if you will. We have gotten consistently better picks at first overall. You know, just going through your recent memory where you talk about Celebrini, who is really pesky for a skill player, which is really cool to see. Of course, you've got Slavkovsky, Connor Bedard, of course, Owen Power, Deline, Lafreniere, Jack Hughes, Matthews. I mean, it's kind of insane that in a 3-year window, you added Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel, you added Austin Matthews, you added Nathan McKinnon a few years before that. And those are probably like the 5 of the 10 best players in the entire world. And they've all come into the league in the last 5 to 10 years. And speaking of that, this is something I was thinking about last night when I was trying to put together ideas for this episode. Crosby enters the league 2005-6-ish. Connor McDavid enters the league in 2015. Crosby has been in the league 10 years. Next year will be 10 years of Connor McDavid in the NHL. To have this much overlap between the generations, you know, you and I were talking about before we started recording. You mentioned Ovechkin. Of course, Anze Kopitar still playing at a very high level out in LA. Drew Doughty, before he broke his ankle, still playing at a very high level. It's still good to see Marc-Andre Fleury kicking around, even if he's not a starter anymore. Jonathan Quick is having a really solid season so far with the Rangers. The NHL having that kind of institutional legacy being maintained where, you know, you have significant overlap between the generations where McDavid has spent his entire life living with the idea of, I want to be Sidney Crosby. And now McDavid's a grown adult. McDavid is married. I'm assuming he will have children at some point. And he's finally going to get to play on a team with Sidney Crosby next year for the first time in his life. I know I definitely want to highlight that and talk about Four Nations in our next segment as something I'm thankful for coming up. But it's just really cool to see the overlap between the generations.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. It's awesome seeing some of these younger players doing their own thing while the old guys are like, hey, we're still this good as well. You know, Sidney Crosby, he's trying to have his 20th point per game season, Nick. That would break the all-time record away from Wayne Gretzky. He's tied with Gretzky right now. And right now, Sid, he's right on the fence of it for point per game right now, but I still think he's going to do it by the end of the season, even though this Penguins team is absolutely terrible this year. Ovechkin, I feel like even though he's hurt right now, he's still going to have a decent shot at breaking the record this year, considering that the start that he had this year. He's still one of the best players in the league. I know you were mentioning a couple of the other players who are a bit older, but Evgeny Malkin was on fire to start this season. He's also had a really nice season. In general, he was well over point per game. It's gone down a little bit these last couple of weeks just because the Penguins aren't that good, but he's still been one of their top players this year. He's also showing the league that even though he's also in his upper 30s, he's playing fairly well as well. You know, you brought up Kopitar too. He's been a menace for the Kings. It's just awesome seeing all of this talent in the league doing their thing, no matter if they're, you know, a bit younger or a bit older. It's a blast, man. And yeah, I have the Four Nations face-off on my list as well. I am super, super thankful that we're getting best on best international competition, not just next year, but in the year after that. It has been so long. Heck, Nick, last time they went like a big, big competition outside of the World Cup of Hockey was the 2014 Olympics, and I was a sophomore or junior in high school that year. It has been way too long since we've got that, man.
We're going to take our first break of today's episode. When we come back, we're definitely going to talk about international hockey some. We're going to talk about last year's playoffs, which Hunter and I both thoroughly enjoyed, and it'll make for good conversation. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On NHL. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Of course, American Thanksgiving, we've got a triple header of football The Bears and the Lions kicking off a little afternoon. The Lions, 10.5-point favorites. The Thursday afternoon game where you will almost certainly be taking a nap. The Giants playing the Cowboys, where the Cowboys are 3.5-point favorites. And then best game of the day, the Dolphins heading up to Green Bay, where the wind chill is expected to be in the high teens to the low 20s, and the Packers are 3.5-point favorites. Head on over to FanDuel.com and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. If you guys know me, you know I love going to games. I love going to shows. Wednesday, went to Devil's Blues with my friends. We avoided everyone we went to high school with out in town. Tonight, I will be at Creed with my friends at Madison Square Garden. We got our tickets through Gametime with some of the best features in the ticket buying experience. My personal favorite, of course, the seat view, where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know what you're walking into before you press that button. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where Hunter Hodies and I are recapping what we're thankful for in the NHL this year. And we teased it in the last segment, but having best on best international hockey is not just a treat as hockey fans, but it is one of the most effective and free marketing tools the NHL has at its disposal. That's part of why they wanted to do the Four Nations face-off, because that is an NHL-controlled entity. It is their buildings, it is their teams, it is their people who are in charge of this, and it's why they wanted a cut of the pie. You know, in an ideal world, you would like to do 8 teams as opposed to 4. You would like to be able to invite the Czech Republic. You would like to be able to do some type of other team in Europe, whether it's Slovakia, whether it's Slovenia, whatever. You would like to be able to represent Germany, where the players you have coming over between Seider, Draisaitl, Tim Stützle. You would like, in an ideal world, to be able to incorporate Russia, because it's hard to say a best-on-best tournament is the best-on-best when it doesn't have the 3rd or 4th best team in the entire world. But of course, geopolitics take precedent over hockey. But this is going to be a lot of fun. I think this is the first time I can honestly say that Team USA is about even talent-wise with Canada in my lifetime. You know, I know a lot of people will say the 1996 World Cup of Hockey is probably the best American hockey team to ever play in a best-on-best tournament, where you had Brett Hull, you had Mike Modano, you had Brian Leach, of course. You had a really, really great team. Mike Richter was outstanding in that series in net. But sitting here now, you know America's got the edge in net between Hellebuck, Swayman. I would assume Jake Ottinger. Connor Hellebuck is in the mix, of course. You've got a great defense where you've got not Jack Hughes. You've got Adam Fox. You've got Quinn Hughes. You've got Charlie McAvoy. You've got Jacob Slavin. That's just as good as what Canada's going to bring. And then up front, you know, we'll see about Austin Matthews' health, but Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel down the middle, and then Jack Hughes, whether you want to play him at center or on the wing, that's as good of a 1-2-3 as America's brought to international hockey since they've started letting professionals participate in the Olympics.
Agreed. And you also have the Kachuk brothers you can put on there. You got Jake Gensel you can put on there as well. This is the best Team USA of my lifetime. It's not particularly close. I am just hopefully making sure that the manager group just brings the best players. Don't do what you did in the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, where you're trying to
Brandon Dubinsky.
Yeah,
no Justin Abdicator.
Yeah, just bringing a bunch of grinders trying to beat Team Canada, who, yeah, to no surprise, they brought all their best players. I still have no clue what the heck Team USA or USA Hockey was doing for that. Total cluelessness. Just bring your best players, see what you can do against Canada, against Sweden, against Finland. But this is, again, by far the best USA team of my lifetime. You're going to see it again in 26 with the Olympics. But you're right, man. This is the best way to grow the game, not just in the United States, but worldwide. I remember, in 2014 with the Olympics, do you remember the shootout, obviously?
Yeah, of course,
Russia,
yeah.
Where
TJ Sochi.
Yes. Everyone even that went to my school, like neighboring schools, were like, holy crap, this is awesome. I'm like, yeah, this is what I mean, this is hockey. Like, it's fantastic to watch. Obviously, you don't see a shootout like this in the NHL on a nightly basis, but it's like, yeah, get into hockey. It is a ton of fun to watch and follow on a yearly basis. And I'm excited for the rosters to drop in about, what is it, Nick? Almost a week now?
A week
Yeah,
or so, yeah.
about a week. And I'm just super stoked to watch this. Getting international hockey back is such a big W for the NHL. It sucks that it didn't happen sooner, but I'm glad at least now, with how much talent there is in the league, that we're getting kind of an appetizer in 2025, and then we're getting the main course with the Olympics in 26. We'll still have to see if Russia is allowed to participate in 26, considering the amount of talent that Russia can throw out there against some of these other teams. But I'm still very stoked about this. And you're talking about, USA and net. Hellebuck, I think, should start.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some other goalies that should be in consideration, but Hellebuck should start. I think he's arguably the best goaltender on the planet right now. But in terms of talent, you compare Canada to the U.S. The U.S. has the talent in net. Forward-wise, I would still lean Canada just because of the forwards they can bring. Defensively, you can maybe go either way. I might lean Canada a little bit, even though the U.S. can bring a lot of great defensemen as well. But it's going to make for a really great game between those two teams, and obviously Sweden and Finland as well. So I am super grateful that this is coming back. And again, the Olympics is going to be a lot of fun in 26 as well, and 2030.
This is a treat. I have long maintained that Sid probably retires after 26 because his contract lines up with that. He gets to represent Canada one last time. And I think about how much it probably means to Nathan MacKinnon and Connor McDavid that they're finally going to get to be on a team with Sid. I mean, you think about it, the last time the NHL did one of these types of tournaments, they were on Team North America. I got the Connor McDavid Team North America jersey over my shoulder. They had them. They had Johnny Gaudreau. They had Nathan. That team
was so fun, man.
Scheifele, Dylan Larkin, Kyle Connor, so much talent on that Team North America group. And one of the more interesting concepts the NHL has put together. Mitch Marner was on that team, Matthews, Eichel, McDavid, of course, just one of the most interesting ideas the NHL's ever had. Speaking of best on best, I know we had this conversation. I vividly remember having this conversation during the conference finals on one of our power ranking shows, as that was the best playoffs probably of my adult life, the best NHL playoffs of my adult life. I know I'm particularly fond of 2018 because of Vegas getting to the Cup final being very weird. The Nashville Winnipeg series in the second round in 2018 is still probably my favorite playoff series, not involving the Rangers, of my life. Other than that, incredible series, up and down, the best teams in the conference finals as well. Really high level talent on both ends. Dallas and Edmonton putting together a classic. Florida and the Rangers putting together a really low scoring, tight spaced, not a lot of chances goalie battle that would have been very in place in 2014. That was very much like watching Henrik Lundqvist and Braden Holtby 10 years ago, where 3 goals is going to win most nights.
Right. And then you add in the Stanley Cup Final, which, Nick, at one point, it was looking like a dud. I mean, the Panthers were having their way with the Oilers in that final, but the way the Oilers were able to storm back, tie that series, send it to a Game 7, almost pull off one of the greatest comebacks in sports history. Honestly, if they had pulled that off, you would have an argument that would have been the greatest come from behind,
series win. Yeah, 100%. It's either that or the Red Sox. Those would have been the two conversations. And the Red Sox had to still go win the World Series, which is why the Oilers doing what they did. I can still vividly picture 11 seconds into Game 1, Zach Hyman getting that odd man rush, peppering Bobrovsky. And if that puck goes in and it's 1-0, that series takes a very, very different swing. Because if you'll remember, the Panthers won Game 1 3-0, and the Oilers had like 70% possession in Game 1. They had a million chances. They just couldn't solve Bob. And it took every last one of those guys digging in to climb out and ultimately forcing to a Game 7. And I've been saying this on Locked On Oilers all season. I am sure Connor McDavid is in bed at night at times and closes his eyes, and he can see himself, just him and Bobrovsky, the net is open, and Brandon Montour had his stick on McDavid's stick, and that's what stopped him from tying that game. me sitting here myself can tell you, I wake up with bad dreams about goals that were missed like that. And I was not the one with the puck on their stick in the game. I was watching on TV or I was at the game, and I wake up in a cold sweat thinking about that. For somebody as hyper competitive and frankly just insane as McDavid, I know that eats him up. And it's why, the man on the mission trope works. I know the Oilers aren't off to a great start, and I do want to talk about them in the next segment as something I'm thankful for. But McDavid with that sole determination is going to be something I'm very excited to see in this second half.
Yeah, this is a long time ago, and I know I've seen a lot of success here in Pittsburgh, but I still at times have waken up, in a little bit of cold sweat about the Marian Hossa chance game 6 against the Red Wings in 2008. Just if you had another millisecond on the clock, I feel like he still scores there. Because sometimes I feel like he scores there and it goes to overtime and somehow the Penguins win and send that back to Detroit. But I still just get chills when I see that play and I wake up from it. I know, again, it's a long time ago at this rate, but it's still ingrained in my memory very much. But, even another series that is still very much ingrained from this year's playoffs, Nick, that Edmonton-Vancouver series was tremendous hockey. Just both teams trading punches back and forth. Vancouver doesn't have Demko. They still almost win that series. The swings of good and bad play in that series was also crazy. It would look like at one point Vancouver was getting badly outplayed, then all of a sudden it was Edmonton getting badly outplayed. And it was awesome seeing those two juggernauts going at it in the second round. The conference finals are obviously great, but I feel like we kind of gloss over the fact that Oilers-Canucks series was tremendous theater. I want another series between those two teams. But yeah, in terms of a Stanley Cup final as well, that Panthers-Oilers series, definitely one of the best of my lifetime.
We're going to take one last break on today's show. We'll come back. We'll tackle the final segment of what we're thankful for in the NHL, so be sure to stick around. If you're a renter, I'd start taking advantage of Built if I were you. Here's the thing. We earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else we buy. But we should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. Built changed the game by letting renters earn high-value points on rent around their neighborhood. There is no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent in your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built rewards towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you are already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. One more time, that is joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl to start earning points on your rent payments today. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where Hunter Hodies and I are breaking down what we are thankful for in the NHL in 2024. The next thing up I wanted to talk about on this list, we talked a little bit about the talent and just how much there is of it, but I don't think people, when you think about where the NHL was 10 years ago, and you think about the types of players that were succeeding, the counting stat seasons guys were putting up on a nightly basis, there's a real argument you're watching like 3 of the 10 to 15 most talented players to ever put on a pair of skates. Watching McDavid every night doing as a Locked On Oilers host, there's a strong argument that when all is said and done, he's the second or third best player to ever play hockey. And I feel really grateful I get to do that on a nightly basis. And look, we can argue the debates of talent versus the resume versus everything, because there's greatest, and then it's like arguing Rodgers versus Brady versus Mahomes. Mahomes is probably the most physically talented. Brady's got the best resume. It's the same thing with McDavid and Sid. McDavid's got the resume. I would argue Sid has the resume. I would argue McDavid might be a little more physically talented, a little bit more dynamic, but no matter what, it's insane how good Connor McDavid is. I am very grateful I get to watch Connor McDavid play hockey.
Hey, ditto with me with Sidney Crosby. Even though he is on this absolute disgrace this year of a Penguins team with how bad they are, it's still awesome seeing him do his thing on a nightly basis. The way that he's still able to outthink players on the ice, the way that he's able to make you look silly despite being in his upper 30s, it's crazy. I mean, again, he is the best grinder in NHL history with the way he plays. I think right now he is a top 5 player in NHL history, and you can certainly make an argument that right now he is a top 3 player in NHL history. He still has even more to succeed before he retires. I know that he wants to try and get this Penguins team back to the playoffs one more time before he laces them up for good. It's not going to be this year, of course, but I'm thinking maybe next year, the year after, it could be his final year, all that good stuff. But it has been a treat to watch Crosby on a nightly basis. Sure, there have been games where he hasn't played his best, but I'm not taking anything for granted, man. I have watched him play in this league for so long, do his thing for so long, create so many new hockey fans in general that I'm not taking anything for granted again with Sidney Crosby. And, I can throw Evgeny Malkin in there as well. This has been the golden generation for Penguins hockey in terms of the success that this organization has had. Obviously, this organization had so much success with Lemieux and Yager and all those guys. But to me, this has been the golden generation. And again, ditto with me with Sid, the way that he's still able to play so well and make plays that just kind of make your jaw drop, even though he's almost 40. It's nuts, man. It really is. And if I had to add one more thing that I'm thankful for, I'm thankful, at least this year, that you're starting to see more GMs being a bit aggressive during the offseason and during the season. You're seeing, for example, Vegas. I've talked about this on the show before, Nick. They're the closest thing to an NBA team with how they're in on every single player. And they're like, you know what? Screw you. We're going to do this. We don't care that it pisses everyone off around the league. We're going to still do this and make everyone mad. You're seeing, offer sheets a little bit more come back at least a little bit this year. I still want to see them come back a little bit more. I want to see that pettiness between GMs saying like, okay, you want to offer sheet me? Okay, I might do that to you in another year. It's just nice seeing some GMs get more aggressive. You're seeing some quotes like Doug Armstrong talking about, what he did, to the Oilers, saying like, hey, I would do this if it was my mom, for example, or anyone else in my family. So I want to see more of that. And I'm thankful that we got a little bit more aggressiveness from some GMs this year.
You and I have been begging for this for a long time. We just want teams to act like they, and it's funny you bring that up because I don't know if you know this or not, Hunter, but there was a report yesterday by both Elliot Friedman and Emily Kaplan that Rangers general manager Chris Drury feels his team is complacent, that the players on his team feel entitled, that they are deserving to be on the team no matter what, that they are very complacent. And Chris Drury's biggest move as Rangers general manager was swapping out Ryan Strome for Vincent Trocheck. Vincent Trocheck is a better player than Ryan Strome, but we're talking about 5-10% better of a hockey player. And he's the one who has the audacity to say other people are complacent. But the last thing I want to get in, and it's in that vein of just making progress as a league. Right now, it feels like we as a league are in reasonable shape for our next collective bargaining situation. That's 2 years from now, and we have had relative labor stability. The fact that the two sides were able to work together through the pandemic to agree to extend the existing CBA through the 2 COVID years, to work it out, to have a functional NHL PA, to have new leadership at the NHL PA. All of this leads me to say that I am very hopeful, and I feel that it's within reason that within the next 2 seasons, we'll have a salary cap over $100 million. There will be more money to pay players. Players will be able to earn more money. There will be more opportunities because I'm assuming we are going to add 2 more expansion teams at some point in the next 5 years, and there will be more jobs for players to get. Even if I don't necessarily agree adding more teams would help the quality of the league, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. The NHL knows it can print a free $1 billion every few years by doling out new expansion franchises. I am hopeful and I am grateful for this period of NHL labor stability. And I am very hopeful that we can keep that going, that we can do our next collective bargaining agreement with no real problems, no real hiccups. I know one sticking point that I'm excited for and hopeful that does come to fruition is shortening the max term on contracts from 8 years to 5 years, because that's why the NBA has more freedom of movement because player contracts in that league are 5-1s where you could do 5 years and then a player or a team option after that 5th year. That's good for both sides because the term will be shorter. The average annual salary will go up. It will increase the ability of players to move because they'll be closer to free agency when typically we see players get moved. But I am thankful for this period of NHL labor stability.
Yeah, and it looks like at least for next year, Gary Bettman has already confirmed that the salary cap is going to be $92.5 million, which is awesome. There was a report, Nick, that Friedman said even the year after that, it was going to be, what was the exact number? 96, 97?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. I kind of had the feeling of, okay, I'll believe it when I see it, just because the NHL is a little bit backwards with this stuff. Similar with 100, I will believe it when I see it, but if it does get to that point, I am going to be excited because, some of these teams that are, even cap strapped right now, they're going to have more cap space to spend a little bit of money. They're going to be able to, fit more players under their cap or maybe move a player or two out to fit another player in. It's going to make for a lot more fun moves, I feel like, in free agency and via the trade market. I feel like the trade deadline could also see some more action. I feel like these last couple of years, in all honesty, this is just my opinion, the deadline is just kind of fallen flat for me just because you're not seeing all these big aggressive moves. You've seen like a few, but there's not like a ton, for example, compared to, even the NBA with their trade deadline is awesome. So I feel like if you're able to get it up to that point and there's no, dumb labor fights or anything like that, I think you're going to see a lot more fun of a deadline. And, who knows, maybe one day it'll rival the NBA's. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That'll do it for today's Thanksgiving edition of Locked On NHL. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next week. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. Please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We will see you guys next week.